Most parents worry about sugar in their kids' diet or screen time, but one of the biggest nutrition mistakes I see parents make has nothing to do with either. It happens in the grocery store while choosing fish for a child. Today, we'll put the most popular fish for kids into three simple categories. Fish that may do more harm than good. Fish that's mostly just protein, not the brain food you think it is. And the safest and most nutritious fish for kids. Because choosing fish for a child shouldn't require a degree in nutrition. It should be simple. And today we'll make it simple. I'll also share my pediatrician's top 3 fish for kids. And the winner is one of the cheapest fish you can buy. Support the channel, like, subscribe, turn on the bell, and let's go. Before we get to the labels, let's quickly talk about why does a child's brain need fish. As I mentioned in one of my previous videos, healthy fats are essential for building a child's brain. And fish isn't just a protein. It's one of the best sources of omega-3. And importantly, the kind of omega-3 the brain actually uses as building material. It's also important for immunity and overall development. And fish is one of the main dietary sources of iodine, a nutrient that helps regulate how a child's brain develops. I have a separate video about that, so be sure to check it out. But here is the mistake many parents don't realize. Not all fish actually provide much of these nutrients, and some fish can create problems of their own. And not just because of mercury, as many parents see some, which brings us to the red label fish. So what exactly can make fish a poor choice for children? There are 3 main things I look at: high mercury levels, high salt content, and surprisingly trans fats. Let's break down all 3 and see how to avoid them. Let's start with the most well-known one: mercury. The problem with mercury is simple. A child's brain is still developing, and mercury can interfere with that development. It has been linked to problems with learning, attention, and concentration. With frequent exposure, it may even affect coordination and motor skills. At high levels, mercury can also affect the kidneys and immune system. And children are especially vulnerable because their brains are still developing and their smaller bodies need much lower doses to be affected. And that's exactly why fish high in mercury get a red label. So which fish are we talking about? As a general rule, the biggest predators tend to accumulate the most mercury. That includes shark, swordfish, marlin, and king mackerel. And then there is tuna. Now here is where things get a little more nuanced. For younger children, I generally place all tuna in the red label category. For older children, occasional light tuna can fit into a healthy diet, but albacore tuna deserves extra caution because it contains significantly more mercury. So when it comes to mercury, those are the fish I'd limit the most. But mercury isn't the only reason a fish can end up with a red label. Because the fish itself isn't necessarily the problem. It's how the fish was processed. Let's talk about salt. Children under 2 years of age don't need added salt at all. In fact, too much salt can place unnecessary stress on their kidneys. As children get older, small amounts become fine. But here is the challenge. Salt is now hiding almost everywhere, and the more highly processed foods children eat, the easier it becomes to consume far more sodium than anyone realizes. That's one reason health experts around the world continue to raise concerns about excessive salt intake in children. So as a pediatrician, I give a red label to salted fish products for younger children. Older children should avoid heavily salted fish. Now, what about canned fish? This is where things get interesting. Most parents think canned fish is loaded with salt, but here is the surprising part. Sometimes a can of salmon contains less sodium than a slice of bread. And sometimes a so-called healthy fish product contains more salt than a bag of chips. The difference isn't the fish, it's how the fish was processed. That's why I always recommend checking the nutrition label. As a simple rule, try to choose products that contain less than 1 gram of salt per 100 grams whenever possible. And for children under 2, I still recommend avoiding fish products with added salt altogether. But now let's get to the most surprising red label category, because almost no parent worries about this when buying fish. Trans fats. Most parents think, if I'm buying fish sticks, fish nuggets, fish cakes or fish bowls. At least my child is getting some healthy omega-3s. Sounds reasonable. But sometimes the exact products we buy for their healthy fats contain fats we'd rather avoid. And that's because some manufacturers use partially hydrogenated oils or other sources of trans fats to reduce costs and improve shelf life. Why does that matter? Because trans fats can take the place of healthier fats that a growing brain actually needs. And here is the really frustrating part. Many fish products marketed to children are made from some of the leanest fish available, fish that already contain relatively little omega-3. Then manufacturers add breading, sometimes large amounts of salt and occasionally unhealthy fats. So parents buy them hoping to get the benefits of fish, but end up with a product that may contain very little of what they were actually looking for. Now, does that mean all fish sticks, fish nuggets, and fish cakes are bad? Absolutely not, and it definitely doesn't mean we can't make our lives easier with convenient food. It simply means we need to read the label once. Find products without trans fats and without excessive salt, and stick with those options. In fact, I'm planning one of the future videos entirely about trans fats and the sneaky names manufacturers use to hide them in children's foods, so make sure you're subscribed. Now let's move to the yellow label category. And honestly, this is where many parents get the most surprised, because these fish aren't dangerous, and they are not the foods I tell parents to avoid. So why do they get a yellow label? Because they are missing the very things we are looking for when we choose fish in the first place. The two biggest examples are pangasius and tilapia. These are some of the most commonly eaten fish in the world. They are usually among the cheapest options. They are sold as boneless fillets, have a mild taste, very little smell, and a soft texture. In other words, they are incredibly easy to get kids to eat, which sounds like a win. But here is the catch. They are mostly just a good protein. About as good a protein source as chicken, but they are relatively low in omega-3 and iodine, the nutrients that make fish unique in the first place. So here is the surprising conclusion. A fish can be completely safe and still not be the fish you want to rely on for brain-building nutrition. So if your child enjoys pangasius or tilapia, that's absolutely fine. Serve it, no problem. But if you are constantly fighting battles at the dinner table because you think this fish provides some extraordinary nutritional advantage, you can stop. In many cases, a serving of chicken offers very similar nutritional value, and probably with a lot less stress. Because the goal isn't to make children eat fish at any cost. The goal is to give them the nutrients we are actually after. And that brings us to the green label fish. These are the fish that are both safe and rich in the very nutrients we are looking for when we serve fish to children, omega-3 and iodine. And here is something that surprises many parents. The healthiest fish for kids isn't salmon or trout, at least not in my ranking. So here is my pediatrician's top 3 green label fish for kids. And the winner is actually one of the cheapest fish you can buy. Let's start with number 3, salmon and trout. I know most people expect them to be number 1, and for good reason. They are excellent sources of omega-3, provide plenty of iodine, and contain a useful amount of iron as well. That's why they easily earn a green label, but they are not the winner. Number 2 is cod, pollock, and haddock. These fish contain a little less omega-3 than salmon and trout, but they are among the very best sources of iodine, one of the most important nutrients for healthy brain development. And now for number 1. Sardines. They provide omega-3 and iodine levels comparable to salmon and trout. But here is what gives them the edge. They are also very rich in iron, and they often cost 2 to 4 times less than salmon, which makes them one of the most nutritious and budget-friendly foods you can put on a child's plate. A couple of honorable mentions also deserve a green label. Herring and Atlantic mackerel. They are incredibly rich in omega-3, but many children simply don't enjoy their stronger flavor. And one more final point. Whenever I talk about healthy fish for children, especially for younger children, I'm talking about fish that is freshly cooked or canned in water or with sour juices, not smoked and not heavily salted fish. Because even the healthiest fish becomes a very different food when the processing becomes the main ingredient. But if your child absolutely refuses to eat fish, don't worry. I'll soon share some practical tricks that really help, Make sure you're subscribed. See you. Kids by Science, where proven wellness for kids meets real life.